All righty, let's get started. We can move a little slow and see if anyone else trickles in this morning. We start by sharing my screen. Oh, just speak of people trickling in. Could I get a designated note taker for today? I can see if I can leave comments. Oh, we go. All righty.
Volunteered in the chat first.
Hmm?
Tim volunteered in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Then it's all Tim. Let's get started. I don't see any new faces, but I'll leave a second. All right, let's go ahead and get started with outstanding RFCs. First up, we have decoupled dependencies, RFC. I've kind of made like lateral headway on this, insofar as one of the RFCs that I opened, the RFC I opened yesterday around standardizing dependency metadata, is sort of a way to remove some of the I guess like complication from this RFC, because it's trying to sort of tackle like how do we do dependency metadata, and how do we then decouple that dependency metadata from the rest of the build pack. So I think that part of the goal of standardizing the dependency metadata is to remove one of those concerns, and we can be more focused on writing some kind of RFC on how to actually distribute that metadata. I don't have any other further comments on that. Next up, we have proposal to publish multi-arch build packs. That is drafted, and Jericho is not here, so we will skip over that for right now. After that, we have a proposal to introduce new Graal VM build pack. I don't see anyone from the Java contingent here. And it sounds like there's some work that is happening on the Oracle front to sort of get this over the line. So I think that we can move on from that, which leads to the two new RFCs, both of which I opened over this last week. And so I would like to go over them. First up, we have codifying the creation of new maintainer groups. This was spawned from a discussion that we had a couple weeks ago with Ozzy around trying to potentially set up a new maintainer group to maintain UBI components. And so he was asking like, well, how do we set up a new maintainer group? And I realized there wasn't process to do so. So this was my attempt at setting that up. There's some discussion here with Dan Makuza already. One of the sort of driving reasons with Ozzy asking to be able to potentially set up another group to maintain several groups that are across across different maintainer groups. I think Dan has some objection to that idea. I haven't really had 100% time to go through and address this point by point. But if y'all have any vested interest in this, by all means, you should check it out. And then the next one I put in yesterday. There's already a little bit of conversation on it from this is already a little conversation on this from a couple of people, but this is a proposal to standardize Paketo dependency metadata format. It's pretty straightforward. Like the kind of motivation is that we have a couple of projects that are going to force us to like update our metadata. In particular, like the introduction of ARM and the removal of stacks, as well as having like discussions on like removing that dependency metadata from the build packs themselves. And so it seems like kind of a good time for us as a like Paketo project to potentially set our own standard for what dependency metadata should look like. I'm also hoping that this will be like a good first agreed thing for the Paketo project for us to like start building some sort of set of standard tooling around. If like the Java and non-Java sides can agree on what this format looks like, we can make parsers for the format and other sort of things that could be leveraged by the Buildpacks. It's pretty straightforward. It's currently missing, and Dan pointed this out, and I just haven't had the time to add it. It's currently missing source checksums and like source URIs. I think that those will I'm trying to figure out exactly where those will end up on the list. I think they will probably be optional. However, I imagine most of the optional things that we have on here will be done by our like our project. So maybe it doesn't make 100% sense to call them optional, but like that's sort of where I am right now. And there's also some discussion around like what would it mean if like what does it mean by having to have like the OS be the OS be required. There's some discussion that like certain Java jars, they don't care at all what OS they're running on because they're compiled completely independent of the operating system, so it doesn't really make sense. You might still want to be able to have that. So there's some stuff going back and forth in there, and then I have some open unresolved questions right now that there's already some comments on as well, but yeah, are there any questions about this?
Yeah, I had two things. The first one is when you had mentioned the source URI field. The first thing that came to mind was that we should probably make that required because it's like a very important, probably piece of the like SBOM metadata that we provide for our dependencies, like where they come from upstream in those checksums. So I'm just weighing in while I have you rather than, leaving a comment on the RFC, but definitely I think that those fields should be required.
Okay.
If we can, even if it means that the URI and source URI fields in a lot of cases will be exactly the same. I think it would still be worthwhile to have it for the cases where they're not the same. And then my second question was, I only gave this RFC a quick scan, but I saw that maybe you had proposed potentially creating like a spec for these changes so that we have like a official place that people can go and like see what the set metadata is, which I think would be a good idea. But I guess related to that, do you have any thoughts on what we would say the timeline is for adopting this new format? Because I could totally see us like, approving this new metadata format and then like not half the project adhering to it and then half the project not moving over to it, because it requires a lot of changes to, Packet and Jam and all of our like different tooling that's like caught up in these different fields. So I'm just wondering if you think that we should include like a definitive timeline for picking up this change.
Yeah. So I want to address both of those comments. The first one around source URI. I really want to try and be as deliberate as I can with the use of optional here, and I'm doing that to kind of like future proof this a little bit, not necessarily like 100%, but like I think that once we have this format decided, it's going to be the format that is also used in the decoupled dependency. And part of the hope of decoupled dependency is allowing third-party vendors to more easily provide their own dependencies to Buildpacks. So having only the fields that like I agree with you that something like source URI is incredibly important to our Buildpacks, and what's why we would keep them in order to build out SBOMs. But if SBOMs are less important to you than being able to supply your own dependencies, might be annoying to have to be like, oh, I have to post some like URI here just so that I can get past like I can meet the API for this. And then the second part of your question is a bit of a two-parter. I don't know that, like, I know that the word spec has like actual technical meanings when you go into like projects, and I'm not 100% confident on what those are. So it's like a specification, but for like a lot of open source projects that has like real implications for the kind of document that is. So it's maybe more like, I think I have in here like an API document, like in order to conform to the best practice API for Paketo, you should look like this or whatever. I don't know exactly, but I think that your question around how do we actually like enforce this upgrade is an interesting one. I think that we would be able to like on the non Java side, we would be able to do something like leverage jam to automatically convert a bunch of these like Buildpack tomls to the new format. I think that's something that we could look into for sure. But I also think that this is something that a piece of commentary or like a question that Dan has asked, like having an actual implementation strategy. And I guess I'm a little unsure exactly how to do this other than I don't know what to make the forcing function. And like uh in some ways, like I think that like the removal of stacks is like a pretty strong forcing function. If we say like, hey, when you do the stack removal work, you also have to now conform to the Buildpacks API, because that's like this is now the only Buildpacks TOML API that is like has consideration for the things that stack removal is going to require. And so I think that might be like the forcing function, but I need to like sit and think about how to encourage implementation more. Which is why I also was like, does it maybe make sense for us to build a tool that uses this, that uses this format, and then like try and embed that tool into like where it would be needed in like jam and libpack, or not jam, excuse me, packet and libpack, so that like the way to do this is like merging those things in, and then the library is the forcing function. But I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Oh yeah, that's fair. We can engage in further conversation on that on the RFC and see what people think. But on the whole, that sounds like a decent plan. I like the coupling it with the stack removal work potentially as well.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to face soon. So we should probably actually, so someone should, and by saying someone, I'm probably volunteering myself, should look into what is actually entailed in doing a stack removal upgrade. Yeah, and some of the problems that might come with that.
So I had a couple of other thoughts. Firstly, we do say that in our RFCs that if you provide a dependency, you must provide an SBOM. So I think we're like A-OK to require you to provide the source checksum fields. Or we need to write a new RFC to make SBOMs optional. So that's just like a small thing. As far as the timeline, in general, unless it's like a really clear timeline, I don't think we put timelines for implementation on RFCs. Like I think there was an RFC around like deprecating or sunsetting the Ubuntu Bionic stuff, but that had like a very hard and very well-defined deadline upstream. In general, we don't put deadlines on like implementing RFCs, so I don't think we should treat this one necessarily differently. That being said, we should implement it because like it's in our interest to do so. And my actual third piece of maybe novel feedback is I would really find it valuable when reading this RFC if we could have like an example of what this looks like for both a packet and a libpack dependency providing Buildpack. Like I'm looking at this and I'm like, I can kind of infer, you know, like what does the OS value actually look like? And when I have metadata.dependencies.distros, like what should those values be? But I think it would be like really like it would save a lot of time if I can kind of like pull up an example of like, oh, if I like look at the spec and it's got an example for like, I don't know, MRI, and then I go to the current MRI implementation, it's much easier to like cross-reference where these like values come from, which I think will aid in implementation. Which
Yeah.
actually leads me to a fourth point, which is I think we should definitely like put this in the Paketo docs, right? Like if under the kind of like building a build pack section, or you know maybe somewhere else. But I think like we should document the spec as you're calling it somewhere other than the RFCs.
Yeah, for sure. And we have like, let me see if I can pull this up. Like we have I'm a little slow this morning. There it is. No, all right, hold on. Whatever. There's let me pause my screen share real quick and I'll pull it up. There's like the community repo, obviously. And I think that in that, yeah, here it is. Of course, it's like the third thing that I look for. It has this style guide in it right now. And maybe style guide is like too light of a word or of a structure for this, but like
I think there's two things though, right? Like I think this is the style guide for like I think I'll phrase this differently. I think there is value in the spec beyond Buildpack authors. I think it's helpful for people who are like consumers of Buildpacks. Maybe they're writing like SBOM browsing software. I don't know, right? Like there's stuff that I think would be really helpful to look to be able to reference in a really like clear paketo.io/docs page. In addition, maybe to sort of like a style guide or something, right? Anyway, it's minor feedback. It wouldn't block the RFC. We can obviously just do it afterwards. We don't need an RFC to update the documentation. I just wanted to like kind of think about where can we post this once we call it a spec, right? Where can we post that so that it's useful for people?
sure.
Okay, I will put these as written comments as well. I just kind of wanted to share them real time.
Awesome. Any other questions or feedback on this RFC? Great. I think that brings us to the end of the RFCs. Is there anyone who has any questions or comments about stuff that we went over? Oh, Jericho's popping in.
Hey,
Hello.
how's my timing?
We were just about to close up going over the RFCs. Is there any update that you'd like to give on the multi-arch build packs or any questions you have about existing RFCs?
No, I have not made any progress on the stacks work that I'm doing. So there's no update there, but hopefully very soon.
Awesome.
Thanks.
In that case, then we can go into our next item, which is C&B updates and questions. Only update that I have is pack 0.31.0 is live. Probably the only interesting thing to anyone here is that it allows you to label build packages. So you can add any number of custom labels to your build package when you do your pack. Build pack create or build package create. I don't know. It's one of those. So yeah, that's the only big change I can think of for this week. Excellent. Are there any project updates that people would like to give? Great. Any open mic questions or discussion topics?
Just a quick question. I joined late, so you might have already talked about this, but the standardized Paketo depth metadata format, is that also part of the RFC that you opened? Is that a different RFC?
What do you mean by that?
This is the same RFC that's like connected to the multi-arch stuff, like how you're going to change the dependencies going forward.
The like decoupled dependency stuff.
Yes.
It's like related insofar as like a component of that was updating what the metadata format would look like, and because we've stalled out a little bit on exactly what needs to happen in terms of like distribution or how we do X, Y, or Z, to like, I guess, clarify that issue. I've separated this RFC out from that, and I think that we want to solve that and then remove that from the other RFC to, simplify and clarify it.
Cool.
This as it stands right now, it does have consideration for the architecture you're running on and like the OS as well. And I believe that Dan has some comments around like, let's see, where are we here? Like having it like right now, like architecture and operating system are currently like required, but like what happens if something could run on both architectures, that sort of thing. So if you have any comments on this in terms of like structure and what you would feel would need to happen for like a really solid multi-arch setup, the goal of this is to like set it up so that it will be good for multi-arch.
Nice. Okay, yeah, I will take a look at this. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something, and thank you for confirming it's something I should look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions people have?
Just a quick question. I assume the work I'm doing is not blocking anything on the stacks front, right? Okay, that's fine.
Cool. All right.
I mean, it's not like blocking anything. Like, I guess we probably won't roll out, ARM64 to the other stacks until we're like fully done with Tiny. So in that way, it's just blocking, but it's, not really, because any progress you make on the stack you're currently working on is still helpful to the entire thing. So I guess the answer is no, it's not blocking, but we probably won't roll it out anywhere else until we're fully done, if that makes sense.
Yep, no, that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, like if somebody was like, we need this sooner than this, just let me know. But I'm going to get to it. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't holding anything up.
Yeah, I agree with Sophie. I don't think you not working on something is blocking something. There is a Slack thread, which I think you're in, where Dan Makusa is pointing out that the Spring Boot community is a consumer of the Tiny stack, and the inability for, how do I want to phrase this? The fact that we now produce a stack that works in ARM64, but we don't have Buildpacks and builders that works on ARM64 is likely to break the Spring Boot community. I am still in the position of I'm willing to wait and see, but I suspect when it does kind of start to hit the fan, it will be a pretty big thing. So I'm wondering, and haven't fully formed this thought, so I wasn't going to say it today, but I'm wondering how can we get ahead of that problem in a tractable manner, right? I was wondering, maybe we need to prioritize getting ARM64 support for the Java and Java native buildbacks, and then we can get a Tiny builder out, right? Because and then Go should just work on any stacks. That should be fine. And then maybe the priority shifts to becoming instead of getting the Tiny stack super 100% production ready, maybe we need to switch gears and be we need to get a thin thread through everything and get a non-production ready builder out. I'm not sure. That's why I said it's not a fully formed thought. I'm a little worried that we're there's a little time bomb here, and one of our biggest consumers that we don't see because they don't directly give us feedback. They kind of sit two steps removed from us. They're Dan Makusa seems pretty adamant that they're about to have a bad time. And I really do not want to revert the stack changes. I think that's a bad idea. I do not want to like maintain two sets of stacks while we iterate on the build packs. That seems unsustainable. So I'm wondering if we can like, you know, identify the minimal possible thing to get a working tiny builder and just sort of switch gears for that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can take a look. I mean, I've already built builders, just not in with your tooling yet. So I can take a look at that. But probably I assume I should finish the multi-arch receipts stuff first, and then switch gears, or should I look at the other thing first?
I'm not sure, and I think that's why I'm saying it's not a fully formed thought. But like, I'm maybe wondering if like maybe we don't need to finish the receipt stuff right now, right? Like we're shipping stacks. Stacks work on multiple architectures, and like we know there's this other problem that we haven't started tackling. Whereas we don't seem to be getting a lot of like feedback that the lack of multi-arch receipts is a pain point. So like, yes, we should do it, but I'm just wondering about like the relative prioritization of different tracks of work.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because nobody's probably cares about the receipts because they have no build packs to actually use the stacks with. So why would they care about the receipt? That makes sense. So yeah, I agree with what you just said, Rob.
And like I know there's like some sharp edges with the lack of receipts also means that we're like not rebuilding ARM64 stacks when there's changes to ARM64 packages specifically. Like there's a whole bunch of like other aspects of the automation. But I guess I'm wondering, and I'm not sure I'm even asserting this. I'm like wondering, is that good enough, right? Is that like is the existence of a tiny stack that is generally mostly up to date on ARM64? Is that good enough for us to sort of like switch gears and get the build packs and the builders working? And I guess Jericho, you're probably the person with the most feedback on this because you know we don't directly use that stuff yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem we're going to run into is all the testing is going to start using different build packs, and I think that if we need to provide a short-term solution so that like communities that are using these like build packs and builders and stacks aren't very unhappy, we probably need to just start shipping something for ARM without fully working out all the testing, and then have that be like the second stage that we do. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm working on something internally where we've just basically rebuilt all of the Paketo build packs that we care about as ARM multi-arch build packs. So I have a little bit of experience dealing with this, but I think to your point, we probably need to just start producing a multi-arch builder, like basically take the tiny multi-arch builder all the way. Like we've got the stack, let's create a builder, and then we can look at the build packs, which will then require us to start talking about the dependency metadata and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, like maybe tiny builder is the next thing. I'm happy to look at that.
Okay, yeah, I think that sounds like the same thing I'm saying. So it sounds like we're on the same page. The tiny build has 3 build packs, well 4 if you include Procfile, Java, Java Native, and Go. So maybe the next step is to try for you to open source the equivalent of version of your tooling to help us build those build packs. I think I'm like cautiously optimistic that all 3 of those should just work because none of those dependencies are compiled for any specific stack. They're all like star stack. So I'm hopeful that but Node isn't on the tiny builder. Oh, but it's inside of Java. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I know this because we were just building all the build packs and I saw Node and I was like, what's this dependency here? But yeah, you're right. For the most part, most of them are things that we can just pull from somewhere. So
okay, cool. But it sounds like that's maybe the gear we should switch. I'll update the Slack thread that we have just to kind of like summarize this conversation. I'm sure Dan Makusa will be very happy to hear this. And I'm optimistic that we will head off any potential Spring Boot related pain points.
Yeah, and just on that note, I mean, I was going to comment on the conversation, but I think you both have stronger opinions than I do. So I just stayed quiet. But if we need to create a tag for like the 0.1 versions of the stacks, I did think that was actually not a bad idea. Not like we're maintaining 2 stacks, but basically like, I guess like people would just use the 0.1 tag and always get AMD 64. And it seemed like a good idea. So if you're willing to consider that, we're not necessarily maintaining multiple things. It's just you're pushing an image to a tag, and it's like a short-term thing.
I think my problem with that though is like it's not like a one and done thing, right? We have to like duplicate all of the automation to keep that stack up to date on that release line. Like otherwise we'll just get the other feedback from the Spring Boot community, which is that like your build is full of CVEs. Which is true.
No, that's true, but we could make that change easily where anytime you create a stack, we just push the 0.1 tag so that whatever stack updates you make, you're always going to push them to 0.1, but it's just going to be the AMD 64 version. Like it's not a multi-R change.
I'm not trying to sound like a no, but I have also reservations about overriding tags. I think that causes other problems. Like we can no longer use tag as an identifier for a stack version. So when someone has a problem, they're like, hey, I'm from the Spring Boot community. I'm using this 0.1 tag. And we're like, cool, could be one of like 4,000 images. We don't know which one you're running. Like that, I've encountered pain points like that, or pain points from this kind of situation in the past. So you could push to a release branch, but then you still have to tag, and then you have to change the tag version. And at that point, we're like halfway through re-implementing all the automation anyway. So this is the rabbit hole I went down. Like,
I trust that. That's why I knew that you had strong opinions for a reason. So I'll just let it be. I'm happy to help if there's something I can do. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, I may have blind spots. I am very willing to accept that, and there may be like I may have prejudices and biases. I'm just worried that like we have not identified a solution that is sustainable for this team, but also provides like a customer experience that doesn't then turn around and bite us in the ass in 6 months. Consumer experience. So that's why I'm like, maybe we should just power through and like get the thin thread working rather than like overthink this.
Okay.
And if you've already done a push to get Buildpacks kind of running on ARM64, then that seems like a really awesome place to start. And as far as Node, I'm not a Node maintainer, so I don't want to speak for folks, but like, I wonder if there's like, a smaller supported area. Yes, hello. There's a smaller supported area of like Node. Maybe we can support like just 18 and beyond, and maybe there's pre-compiled but like binaries for ARM64, and we don't have to set up like compilation on an ARM64 runner and that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm wondering like that there might be other like ways in which we can cut scope to simplify this as well.
On the Node front, it depends. Like the community does ship ARM binaries that should run on whatever Linux is, as long as the kernel version is recent enough. And for the UBI ones, the way we're installing them, it should just work, since we're DNF installing them, and RHEL does, or UBI does support ARM.
Yeah, taking a quick look, Node actually only compiles anything for or only compiled anything for Bionic. So I think that you can get that maybe for free.
Yeah, that all tracks with my memory. I just didn't want to like make that assertion. So yeah, I'm optimistic that we don't have to boil the ocean and kind of like invent ARM64 compilation and all that kind of stuff, which we will have to do for things like Python, but Python isn't in the tiny builder. So that's a future problem.
One thing I'm not entirely sure about is Yarn. I think it might have some platform dependencies, but I'm not really sure on that one.
If it does, it appears that we don't do any compilation for that either.
Okay.
So it would be whatever we're able to pull from Yarn itself.
Okay, good.
So just to make sure I understood, the artifacts that Paketo is hosting, it's just a copy of somebody else's compiled, like downloaded a compiled on AMD 64 node installation, and then you just
whatever's hosted by Node is what we pull from.
Okay, cool, great, cool.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I guess just one additional thing to add on that front is, I guess as we add ARM, it would be great if it's easy to add others, because like, for the UBI ones, we'll likely want to add the equivalent for power in S390. So I guess if it's just the node that we pull from the community, though, like that doesn't, like, if it's just node itself where we're worrying about the platform versus any of the other pieces, that should automatically be handled by the UBI side of things anyway. But really just keep in mind there might be something beyond ARM as another platform that, so if it's as generic as possible, that would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we're not really able to test stuff right now anyway, then we can just build all the architectures that are supported, so long as we can compile and build. So yeah.
And I guess the testing part is maybe related, like I'm currently looking at PR to Jam, and I can see it builds for some platforms, but like that would be a case where we would need additional platforms to run the tests, right?
Yeah, that's the part.
Okay.
Like if we really want to test on each one, and I don't know about, I guess you'd have to test in emulation. I don't know. Yeah, then you get into how do you pack build and create an image and then test it. Then it, gets more complicated. But yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind, that we may want to use other architecture. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Awesome. Anything else? Great. Well, thank you all.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Yeah.